Right. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to kick off our session today with a warm welcome to all of you who are joining us, especially our wonderful panelists for our presentation on the perspectives of emerging leaders in the Global South, science advisory and capacity building diplomacy for addressing the Sustainable Development Goals. As I mentioned in the chat, we would appreciate if you could rename yourself and include your institution so that we know who we are speaking to this morning, this afternoon, and get to know you a little bit. Also to let you know that we have simultaneous interpretation available for this session. You can click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen to activate if you would prefer to listen to this presentation in Spanish. You can post your questions at any time in the chat, and we will also be providing ample opportunity for a discussion session throughout our session today. So today's agenda, we will start with our representative from the II, Marcella Ohira, who will discuss and provide insight on science diplomacy and science advice from the perspective of the Global South. And then in section 2 of our presentation today, we will discuss a little bit more about having an inclusive learning space and a platform to build constructive dialogues. And this is where we will have a panel of our early career researchers and fellows who are part of our STEP program, sharing their work on the ground and how it's related to supporting sustainability and the sustainable development goals in each of their countries. The third part of our session today is to interact with you, our audience, on these questions, which we do compile and we do share as we go along in all of our presentations, and we use to build our own capacity building programs as well. So we look forward to hearing from you and your interactions. So to kick us off, I'm very happy to introduce Marcella Ohira, our Deputy Executive Director and Director of Capacity Building for the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research. Marcella has designed and launched innovative capacity building programs at the III to foster science policy interface, science advice and diplomacy, transdisciplinary research training, and the development of multinational networks, such as the Science, Technology, and Policy STEP Fellowship Program, and the Inter-Transdisciplinary Training and Seed Grant Program for III's 19 member countries. She has also led and organized over 50 IAI training events on several global environmental change issues of policy relevance. Before her tenure at IAI, Marcella worked with Brazil's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and at the US NOAA Office of Global Programs. Marcella, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you're able to share yours and turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Kim, for the kind introduction. I'm really delighted to be here and to share the floor with not only Kim, who is our STEP program manager, but especially with our STEP fellows, Rosario, Larisse, and Teresa. And as you can tell, they are the emerging leaders. They're coming from the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. So I'm really looking forward to this really interesting discussion, listening to their perspectives, because one of the goals of the II is to work with those emerging leaders. You are the ones who will be conducting research, global change, will be designing, implementing policies in your countries, in our region, to address those huge global challenges that we face today, dealing with the environment and dealing with human well-being. So I'm really happy that we have this opportunity to engage in this amazing discussion today at this conference. But I would like to start just sharing with all of you an idea of what the II is. I'm sorry, I guess you can see the full screen. Sharing what the II is, what we do, and why we are engaged in those big challenges of building capacities to address global environmental change and the impacts on society. Basically, the II was established 30 years ago, and you may recall that in the early 1990s, there was the discussion of world leaders about the ECO 92, the Sustainable Development Conference in Rio de Janeiro. So many governments were discussing environmental issues, were discussing what was needed to address those big challenges, such as climate change and biodiversity conservation. And within that discussion, there was this recognition, there was the need to augment our scientific knowledge of global change processes that were either natural or human-driven, but also the importance of having that scientific information to support policy decision-making, both at the public and the private sectors. And there was also the awareness that not a single country would have the resources, human, financial, institutional, to address those regional or global challenges. So with that in mind, 16 original countries signed what it was so-called the Montevideo Agreement. Today, 19 governments have joined the II. So we work with 19 parties from all parts of the Americas. The II headquarters are located in Uruguay, as you can see in the map. Uruguay is our host country, but we do work cross borders. We work with 19 governments, 19 countries. We work with the scientific community from various different backgrounds. So the II was really designed to be a collaborative effort. It was really innovated at its time in 1992 with this recognition of the importance of science to support decision makers in designing more environmental friendly policies based on sound scientific knowledge. So 30 years later, the II has been recognized as a leading organization in the Americas that has supported the development of collaborative research networks addressing key issues for governments and for scientific community and society, climate change, biodiversity, ecosystem services, oceans, terrestrial ecosystems, and also sectors that are very important to society, such as the health sector, agriculture, energy, the natural disasters. So I think the importance of the II is that it has been considering an evolving scientific agenda that are based on national and regional priorities. The priorities of the II are designed on national and regional priorities of the governments, the 19 governments that the II works with, but in close consultation with the scientific community. And I think it's important that the scientific agenda and all programs and activities that are supported and developed by the II have to be evolving, have to be in constant consultation with both the governments, the parties, but also the scientific community and society in general. To give an example, when the II was established in 1992, the scientific agenda was very technical in the way that it was read. It included terms as high latitude processes or climate variability, terrestrial ecosystems, which for the scientific community is probably very easy to understand. But perhaps for some policymakers that do not have a scientific background or society in general, they were not really able to grasp the meaning and the importance of those phenomena, natural phenomena, but also the impacts that they would have on productive sectors of the countries. So I think the II was sensitive enough to evolve even the language of how we are communicating our science and the importance of global environmental change to society and to different tiers and levels of government. So today we speak words such as food security, water security. We speak in the words that can match with the sustainable development goals that have been agreed by many sectors of society, but most importantly, the governments. So I think we can relay the importance of generated scientific knowledge to be able to respond to the sustainable development goals that are shared by many and most governments in our continent, especially. So the II operates even within the governance that are prioritized by national regional agendas, but taking into account the commitments that governments and parties have to international agreements, such as the UNFCCC, the Paris Agreement, the Biodiversity Convention. How can the II support the generation of scientific information and knowledge that can provide the ability of governments to cope and meet those targets, cope and meet those commitments? So I think we have to be integrated and comprehensive also to consider not only environmental agreements, but also trade agreements, other agreements that are cross-cutting to everything that we do in terms of a global environmental change agenda. And in order to do that, the II designs and develops a number of science programs and science activities. We launch open calls to support collaborative research. We are inclusive. We even have approved an EDI, an equality, diversity, inclusion, taking into account, gender issues that to us it's of extreme importance. We also support, projects that are based on peer review. They have to be based on the merit, the excellence, the best science that we can support, credible science, open science, all information and data that is generated on based on the II science programs. They have to be open source. They have to be open and shared with the scientific community and with the governments. So I think with that into account, the II has been supporting over the past 30 years the collaborative research networks, including several scientists and institutions from the 19 members in the Americas from diverse scientific backgrounds. And the II has been focusing a lot on TD, transdisciplinary scientific approaches, which has many challenges. As you can imagine, different tiers of challenges are the interdisciplinarity, are also how to engage with policy and decision makers. There are challenges of communication, of time and spatial scales. But in order to be able to provide better responses to global change challenges, we have to support transdisciplinary research, because we have to include different areas of scientific knowledge from natural, social, human, biological, engineering sciences, but also to work in close collaboration with stakeholders, decision makers who you will be able to use that scientific information to design more appropriate and more effective policies at the public and the private sectors. And we have to be inclusive to also take into account all countries from the region, from large scale and large countries to small countries, even when there are differences in terms of scientific development of the community in small countries and large countries. So the II has also a big challenge in building capacities, human capacities, institutional capacities, but not only in science, but also in particularly in policy and science policy and in diplomacy as we operate cross borders. With that in mind, we go beyond traditional methods in capacity building. We consider not only the importance of supporting graduate students and be able to have the next generation of scientists who will and who are and will be leading global change research at their countries and in the Americas. But especially, how can we better prepare those researchers to be able to work very closely with policy and decision makers? How are they able to, provide scientific input that is of importance not only to their own countries, but to the neighboring countries, as challenges are cross borders, are transboundary. How can we provide them with the skills that they can negotiate agreements, being right on the interface of science and policy, using international collaboration and diplomacy as an important methodology to bring countries together to address common challenges. So I think with those challenges in mind, the III has established the STEP, the Science, Technology, and Policy Fellowship Program, providing really hands-on opportunities for those bright early career scientists from the Americas, especially from Latin America, Caribbean, to have this wonderful experience of working in close collaboration with policymakers, understanding what is the agenda of national governments, what are the threats that they're considering in terms of better preparing the countries to address those challenges. How can we flow solid scientific information to support evidence-based policies that are looking at different aspects of scientific knowledge to be able to support better policies for our countries and our regions. We also have and are establishing now the II Science Diplomacy Center, which has a huge task of bringing countries together to provide capacity building, not only in science, but especially in science policy and also in diplomacy. How can we all work together? Scientists, policymakers, including diplomats. We have to be integrative. We have to have this concept of leaving nobody behind, that everybody is important, the society, civil society, foundations, development banks, the private sector, and not only, the usual suspects that we are used to working with, which are governments and the scientific community. How can we design integrative and comprehensive programs that we can work to collaboratively with all those stakeholders? What can each of us bring to the table in terms of science, but not only scientific knowledge, other sorts and kinds of knowledge that are also important, such as indigenous and traditional knowledge, rural experiences from farmers, even policymakers' experience and how they design, what are the challenges that they face, how can the science then support those processes? So there are big questions that I think we all have these huge responsibilities of discussing and addressing together. And I think programs such as the STEP program, the fellows role in governments, in the private sector, across borders, the Science Diplomacy Center that will bring all those fellows, all those institutions together, thinking more at the global and regional challenges, right? How can we work together, different nations, different sectors, different scientific disciplines to address those big challenges and hopefully come back with better solutions. But I'll stop here and back to you, Kim, because I think you have amazing experiences to share about how the STEP program is evolving, and finally the opportunity to listen to our 3 STEP fellows from Panama, Brazil, and Jamaica. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcella. How very kind of you. Can everyone see my screen now? Yes? Okay, great. No, I always appreciate Marcella's context and institutional knowledge coming from the II. We have such a unique position as an intergovernmental organization representing our 19 member states across the Americas to really, and we often say our agreement was rather revolutionary in mentioning terms like transdisciplinary science. So for 30 years, we have been talking about integrating all of the stakeholders. And when we think about what does transdisciplinary mean, that approach as it applies to research, you realize that it also applies to the way we live our lives. And that's a common term that we use at the II, transdisciplinary as a way of life. How can we be more inclusive? How can we be better listeners? How are we making sure that everyone is at the table? All of the decision makers, anyone who's affected by a problem. It is a harder way of conducting research, and it takes different skills. So this is why we put together these learning spaces for us to really practice and hone in on these skills that not just researchers, but I think all of us need as we play active roles in our communities across the globe in confronting the urgent challenges that we are witnessing and living today. So when we talk about the science policy interface, especially in the global South, and I think Marcella alluded to this very well, we have a diversity that we are dealing with that is vast. It's a human diversity, a cultural diversity. It's also a biodiversity, a natural biodiversity that we need to conserve. And that means that we need to be making decisions that are informed by evidence. And in this part of the hemisphere, what we really need to do is focus on strengthening that science policy interface, as Marcella said. And a lot of that is this term that I really like called institutional boundary spanning. So we're really trying to prepare individuals, but also how do those individuals then strengthen the institutions with which they work? And then also, how can institutions themselves then embody that mentality and mindset of collaboration and inclusion and action in the decision-making atmosphere and role. So we really are trying to hone in on the power of early career researchers, because we feel that there's a unique energy amongst those early career researchers in our region. And Teresa, you may smile, but I love including your artwork here because I think that this just goes to show that we're not just researchers, we are whole human beings, and some of us have artistic talents to share with the world. And this is actually a collage built, put together by one of our panelists and fellows at the IAI to really try and communicate where we see the Americas in the next 30 years. This was the challenge. And we are, as fellows, marching into this interface that is sort of undefined here into a more sustainable future. So just to wrap up before I pass on to our panelists, as Marcella mentioned the STEP program, I really want to emphasize that this is novel for the Global South, right? These are programs that we really need to build. And we have partnered strategically with programs, other science, technology, and policy programs that have been in North America, like the AAAS program, like My Tax Canada, who have been working in the case of AAAS for decades on building capacity in researchers that want to make that jump into being science advisors and science diplomats and working in the government and supporting that. And so we have these strategic partners. They are part of our STEP program and our science diplomacy training program. But we also have, for the first time, been able to very flexibly invite different countries from Latin America and the Caribbean to be part of a science, technology, and policy fellowship program. And this is a map of how we've grown. We started in 2020 with just 17 fellows, and in 1 year we grew to more than 45 fellows in 11 different countries. And it is a wonderful experience. We're very happy to have this wide level of diversity. And what we do is we provide each of these fellows with a complementary professional development training program. So everyone, including our fellows here, are working on the ground on issues, on work plans and projects, which they will be sharing with you today. But in addition to that, we accompany them as the II with a professional development training program, and we bring most of them together under the science diplomacy pillar. We also focus on leadership skills and communication skills. But the science diplomacy angle is very interesting. And I think this is a unique, as Marcella said, this is in the bones of the II, really. And so this is something that we're really instilling in our fellows as we work on training and giving them the skills. And just to give you an idea, our fellows come together in this training and then they work on these group projects. And I just want to point out the topics that they are addressing this year in our curriculum. They are very diverse, they are very timely and pertinent, And some of them, in some cases, are at the direct request of host institutions. So for example, number 5, the 30 by 30 conservation ambition. This came at a specific request by Environment and Climate Change Canada, which is our focal point at the III, who was eager to find out, we have this national priority and challenge, and we want to know how other countries in the Americas are achieving this goal. Let's use this project that our fellows are participating in to map all of the different countries that are participating in this program. And so it's a safe learning environment, it's theoretical, but we're also putting into practice some really pertinent issues like climate justice, like the extraction of mineral resources for the electronic vehicle movement that's happening in North America that has very strong effects on the global south. These are issues that our fellows are tackling head on this year in our program. So now I'm going to pass it over to our fellows, and this is a map of everyone we have. We have the 42 different disciplines present in our cohort. We are female strong, as you can tell also by our panel. But it is a joy to welcome all of these different fellows working across 11 different countries. And so it's with my great pleasure that I would now like to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to our first fellow who will present today, Dr. Rosario Quintero. For some reason, my little bar is not showing Rosario. So if you want to just jump in and start sharing your screen.
Sí.
And
Sí,
I will remind everyone.
Sale que debes de dejar de compartir pantalla para yo poder iniciar.
Okay, so my little Zoom tag gets fickle and doesn't want to show up. Hello. And as a reminder, while we figure this out, you can switch over because Rosario will be speaking to us in Spanish today. So if you want to switch over to the interpretation channel at the bottom. Yeah. Can you do it now, Rosario? I just made you co-host.
Sí, ahora sí. Sí. Okay,
Oh,
muy
yep.
bien, listo.
Perdón.
Muy bien. ¿Pueden verla? ¿Pueden ver mi presentación?
Sí.
Listo. Muy buenos
So
días a todos.
Rosario, I'm
Sí.
so sorry to interrupt you. If you could just take a brief moment to introduce yourself and SENACYT. And thank you again for joining us today.
Muy buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Rosario Quintero. Soy investigadora del programa de estancias en Ciencia, Tecnología y Políticas del Instituto Interamericano para la Investigación de Cambio Global, IAI, y la Secretaría Nacional de Tecnología e Innovación, SENACYT. Estoy muy contenta por la invitación que me ha hecho el IAI a través del programa STEP. Me emociona mucho porque somos la primera generación que estamos representando a Panamá y en esta oportunidad me complace entonces poder hablarles un poco acerca del proyecto que venimos liderizando, que es la creación de la Plataforma Agropecuaria de Panamá y su vinculación con los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible. ¿Por qué hacemos este trabajo? Por la necesidad de identificar en el sector agropecuario que no ha podido posicionarse entre los sectores más influyentes y generadores de la economía panameña. Uno de los factores percibidos es la poca productividad del sector y la baja competitividad a nivel internacional. Entonces, ¿cómo hemos pensado este trabajo? A partir de la identificación de diferentes instituciones que generan datos para el sector agropecuario. La propuesta se consolida a través de información estadística y la presentaremos a través del portal agropecuario de una manera amigable, segura y accesible para cualquier usuario que desee accesar a ella. Esto servirá para la generación de políticas públicas necesarias para mejorar y apuntar el crecimiento del sector. ¿Cómo hemos planificado este portal agropecuario? Lo hemos planificado a través de un planificador interinstitucional que se encarga de los convenios, las gestiones y coordinaciones a través del Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Censo. Resalto que el Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Censo es una institución que está vinculada a este proyecto para la creación de esta plataforma. También contamos con un planificador geográfico que esa persona estará generando los datos geoespaciales, la localización de tierra, dónde están los cultivos, los árboles, los ríos, dónde están las cooperativas y asociaciones y las ferias agropecuarias. Contamos con un planificador informático que se encarga de la construcción, el diseño del portal y los dashboards estadísticos inteligentes. También contamos con un planificador económico agropecuario que se encarga de lo que es la transferencia o la logística y la revisión de los datos estadísticos que vengan de otras instituciones que están vinculadas al sector agropecuario y están generando estas informaciones. De SENACYT está representado por mi persona, que vengo siendo también un planificador interinstitucional. Yo me encargo pues de darle seguimiento a los convenios interinstitucionales y seguimiento a la ejecución de esta plataforma agropecuaria. Y por último, entonces, lo que es la dirección y la asesoría jurídica del INEC, que se encargará de la realización y monitoreo de los convenios y seguimiento al avance de la plataforma. Metodología y métodos. Realizaremos un estudio exploratorio y descriptivo con metodología cuantitativa y cualitativa que busca analizar la probabilidad del cumplimiento de las metas de los OEDC preidentificados ¿dónde? En el cuestionario del Censo Experimental Nacional Agropecuario que estará ejecutándose el próximo año. Luego, nos permitirá confirmar este cumplimiento a través del cuestionario del Censo Nacional Agropecuario que tiene previsto ejecutarse en el año 2024. Para el censo, entonces, exploratorio, hemos identificado las áreas censales, cuántos empadronadores tendremos, cuántas encuestas se realizarán por día. Aquí tenemos un aproximado, se realizará a nivel nacional, en las 10 provincias y la comarca Nove Buglé. Alrededor de 2.246 entrevistas, 42 empadronadores. Generalmente estos empadronadores forman parte del Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Censo a través de la sección agropecuaria y pesquera. Aproximadamente cada empadronador estará ejecutando alrededor de 5 encuestas. Ustedes se preguntarán por qué solamente 5 encuestas. Porque recuerden que es una encuesta exploratoria que nos podrá vincular a nosotros, poder conocer cuántas encuestas podrá hacer este encuestador para entonces lo que venga a ser el censo nacional. ¿Cómo nos vinculamos nosotros el portal con las ODS? Hemos vinculado algunas metas, algunos objetivos, como el objetivo número 2, tiene que ver con el hambre cero, y lo hemos vinculado al capítulo del cuestionario del censo que tiene que ver con los datos del productor y cómo aporta este objetivo al indicador en la localización del productor, su explotación agropecuaria. Apoyará proyectos para el fomento de la cooperación nacional e internacional que asegura la inversión en la infraestructura y la tecnología necesaria para mejorar la productividad y sostenibilidad agropecuaria. ¿Qué otro objetivo hemos identificado? El objetivo número 5, que es la descripción del género, está relacionado con el capítulo tenencia de la explotación agropecuaria. ¿Cómo aporta ese capítulo al indicador? Identificaremos la presencia de la mujer, muy importante en esta era, en las actividades agropecuarias. Saber si el productor cuenta con su tierra que esté titulada. A través de los mapas geoespaciales que vincula esta plataforma agropecuaria, podremos identificar las ubicaciones de estas explotaciones. O sea, también saber mujeres y hombres forman parte dependiendo de corregimiento, distrito hasta provincia. Continuamos la segunda diapositiva. Disculpen. El objetivo número 7 está vinculada con la energía asequible y no contaminante. La hemos relacionado con el capítulo de innovación y tecnología en la explotación agropecuaria. ¿Cómo lo hemos vinculado al indicador? Conocer la data, el tipo de tecnología relativa a la energía limpia, incluida las fuentes renovables y menos contaminantes de combustible. El objetivo número 9, que trata de la industria, innovación e infraestructura, relacionado al capítulo del cuestionario con maquinaria, infraestructura que se utiliza en la explotación agropecuaria. ¿Y cómo le hemos vinculado al indicador? Se identificarán los avances tecnológicos del productor a través de la inversión en infraestructura e innovación con que cuente este productor. El objetivo número 12, que señala la producción y consumo responsable. Está relacionada con el capítulo de medio ambiente y prácticas agropecuarias, vinculada al indicador que podremos mostrar una estadística actualizada que apoye a una planificación eficiente de saber qué, dónde invertir y así evitar el desperdicio de los alimentos. El objetivo número 13, que trata de la acción por el clima. ¿Cómo lo hemos relacionado con el capítulo de la encuesta? En la disponibilidad de agua, riego y energía eléctrica y agroquímicos. ¿Cómo lo hemos aportado al indicador? En la identificación o carencia de tecnologías medioambientales dentro de este sector agropecuario. Serán cuantificadas y ubicadas. Con estas informaciones ayudará a mitigar a los efectos de invernadero que traen consigo un aumento en la temperatura. El objetivo número 14, que trata de la vida submarina. Esta es la primera vez que el Censo Agropecuario de Panamá estamos incluyendo el capítulo de pesca artesanal. ¿Cómo lo hemos vinculado con el indicador? Identificar cuántos pescadores artesanales existen y qué variedades de peces comercializan. Esto apoyará y medirá desarrollar la capacidad de investigación y transferencia de tecnología marina, muy importante para nuestro país. Y por último, el objetivo número 17, que trata de la alianza para lograr estos objetivos. ¿Cómo lo hemos relacionado al indicador? Con el financiamiento y la asistencia técnica. Para lograr el desarrollo y crecimiento sostenible, es vital que se coordinen las políticas para ayudar a promover el acceso a las exportaciones, a los créditos agropecuarios, a las fuentes de apoyo técnico y académico esenciales para el sector. A través del portal se logrará identificar todas estas variables que ayudarán a la mejor toma de decisiones. Actualmente estamos en la creación y coordinación de convenios con todas las instituciones de Panamá vinculadas al sector agropecuario y que generan información estadística. El Instituto Geográfico Nacional Tomiguardia, ya desarrollamos una primera reunión, ellos nos aportarán en datos geoespaciales para conocer la localización de la tierra y la tierra disponible para la cosecha, a través del MIDA, a través de cuántos productores agropecuarios existen, los mercados nacionales de la cadena de frío, saber dónde están localizadas estas cadenas para la comercialización de los productos agrícolas. La Autoridad de Recursos Acuáticos de Panamá nos apoyarán entonces lo que es el aporte técnico para la parte de pesca, saber cuántos pescadores existen, dónde están localizados. La Autoridad Nacional de Tierra nos estará aportando al portal saber cuántas tierras tituladas cuenta el productor panameño, tanto para hombres y mujeres. La Autoridad Nacional de Aduanas con la información estadística de exportación e importación agropecuaria. La Superintendencia de Bancos nos apoyará en la transferencia de información en cuanto al crédito bancario vinculado al sector agropecuario, mi ambiente con todo lo que es el tema forestal, los tipos de árboles que se siembran, la cantidad de ríos donde están ubicados, el Ministerio de Economía y Finanzas también con información estadística vinculada con aduana, de todo lo que tiene que ver con las exportaciones e importaciones. El Instituto de Mercadeo Agropecuario nos apoyará con asistencia técnica para la realización también de estas encuestas, y el Instituto Panameño Autónomo Cooperativo nos aportará también información estadística actualizada de las cooperativas cooperativas agropecuarias que existen, cuántos socios cooperativistas dentro del sector existen, tanto masculino, femenino, cuál es el financiamiento que tienen, en fin. Y por último, ETESA, a través de la Dirección de Hidrometeorología, queremos vincular dentro de esta plataforma, conocer la parte del clima, muy importante para la toma de decisiones en cuanto a saber a la siembra, cómo sembrar sin que esto nos afecte. Nuestra propuesta es a quién nosotros estamos vinculando como primera necesidad de este portal, a la comunidad científica, a la comunidad educativa, a las instituciones gubernamentales y privadas, a los productores agropecuarios, a los tomadores de decisiones, a los organismos nacionales, en fin, a cualquier persona que lo requiera. ¿A quién beneficiará? Esto beneficia a la unión gubernamental dentro del sector. Todos estos actores que necesitamos firmando convenios estarán enlazados a través de esta plataforma. Todos estaremos vinculados. Esto aportará estudios y decisiones eficientes para la creación de políticas públicas más acertadas. ¿Y qué ofrece nuestro portal? Es un portal gratuito, accesible, confiable, seguro y sostenible a través del tiempo. Aquí le presentamos un pequeño ejemplo de cómo actualmente del borrador del portal agropecuario. Todavía no está definido, está en etapa de construcción. Nos sentimos muy contentos porque ya estamos vinculando a las diferentes instituciones que mostrarán dashboards dinámicos que muestren la parte estadística de las producciones. En fin, estamos muy contentos, pero esta es una etapa borrador. Aún estamos en proceso de construcción. Bueno, y no quisiera concluir porque esto es un proyecto que está en fase, no inicial, en fase intermedia, porque estamos en plena planificación y construcción, pero los pasos a seguir serían continuar con las reuniones interinstitucionales para el cumplimiento permanente y dinámico de mantener el portal agropecuario actualizado, establecer los convenios interinstitucionales para que el proyecto se mantenga permanente como una política de Estado, e identificar aliados nacionales e internacionales que aporten al proyecto financieramente o en aspectos técnicos. No me despido sin antes agradecer al Gobierno Nacional a través del Gabinete Social que emplea el Plan Colmena. Este Plan Colmena trabaja desde sus inicios con los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible para que Panamá, a través de todos los sectores que conforman el país, puedan implementar y ejecutar los diferentes objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. La Contraloría General de la República, a través del Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Censo, quien está apoyando a la construcción de este primer portal agropecuario de Panamá, a la Secretaría Nacional de Ciencia y Tecnología de SENACYT por hacer parte de este convenio junto al INE, y al Instituto Interamericano para el Cambio Global, a través de STEP, de quien me siento orgullosa de formar parte. Les agradezco a todos por su amable atención.
Gracias, Rosario. Excelente presentación. I will switch back to English so that our interpreters don't get frustrated with me. But I really appreciate that. And I failed to share at the beginning of the presentation that I myself work for the II from Panama. So it is with great excitement that I see Rosario working on this incredible endeavor for a small country to have this level of information to make decisions in a very important sector. And I am utterly impressed by the amount of institutions that you are bringing together. And so, Rosario, could you just share with us quickly, what is your background and how do you feel when you bring together all of these institutions? What are the skills you need to convene them all at the table?
Interés, motivación. Yo empecé trabajando de forma gratuita en una pequeña cooperativa agropecuaria en un corregimiento de mi país. Allí yo pude ver las deficiencias con que se encontraba el sector. Eso me hizo a mí preguntarme el por qué existen problemas para la comercialización, por qué el productor deja de sembrar algo para meterse en otra cosa, falta de estructura, de planificación, de apoyo técnico. Allí entonces yo estudié un doctorado en gestión agropecuaria en Montpellier, Francia. Allí yo vine con una mentalidad más amplia en poder no desarrollar, pero sí ejecutar proyectos de una forma más ágil, y eso me llevó entonces a trabajar en el Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Censo. En su momento fui la planificadora del Censo Nacional Agropecuario. En estos momentos, como formo parte de STEP, tuve que dejar la planificación, pero sigo como consultora del Censo Nacional Agropecuario. Es por eso de que yo he vinculado las preguntas del cuestionario del censo con los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Tengo una maestría en cooperativa, conozco de cerca el sector, el compromiso que tengo por el amor al sector agropecuario, esa nostalgia que me hace sentir del productor que no tiene ese conocimiento técnico o analítico de capacidad innovadora, me hace a mí de una forma altruista poder apoyarles. Entonces, más que nada, todo este proyecto viene en base a mis experiencias motivacionales, a partir de nostalgias, y me siento contenta de que los convenios que estamos ahorita implementando, los diferentes directores de estas instituciones y viceministros y ministros están contentos de formar parte porque saben que es un ganar-ganar, y estamos involucrando a todo un país. Y será el primer portal agropecuario de Panamá. Así que esto no es un proyecto mío, esto es un proyecto de Panamá, para Panamá y para el mundo. Así que muchas gracias, Kim, a Marcella, bueno, Larisse, a Teresa. Estoy contenta, pues, lo repito nuevamente, somos la primera generación de STEP junto a mi compañera Natalia Tejedor, que también es investigadora por la Universidad Tecnológica de Panamá. Nos sentimos muy emocionadas y pueden contar conmigo, pues, para cualquier proyecto que tenga que ver con los ODS, cambio climático. Eso es lo que se está en el momento, pues, ejerciendo mucha efervescencia a nivel mundial.
Perfecto, Rosario. Excelente ejemplo de la energía que necesitamos. Marcella, you had a question or comment. Please go ahead.
I do. Thank you, Kim. First, I'd like to congratulate Rosario for this excellent presentation. And it really shows, the importance and the kind of work that our fellows are doing for their countries and for their host institutions, in this case, the Secretary for Science and Technology of Panama. So the task of the fellows, it's not easy. They have to combine the science, and they have to combine that to respond and to be able to help decision-making for their host organizations, which are public ministries or secretaries. What is the challenges and the priorities that institutions like SENACYT have, that they can take on the expertise of our fellows to build such a platform in an important sector as Rosario and Kim, you were pointing out, such as agriculture for Panama, how to get farmers involved, how to get the scientific community involved to develop a platform that is a win-win, as Rosario was saying, to many institutions, many universities, and especially farmers. So I think this is the work plan, which is an amazing one that Rosario was able to develop in collaboration with SENACYT. And my second and last comment is to really congratulate SENACYT for its vision in joining the III in the STEP program and providing, the two Panamanian STEP fellows, Rosario and Natalia, the opportunity to participate in the program, to be able to bring this important interface of science and policy, not only for Panama, but also how to connect Panama with other countries that have similar challenges, such as food security and agriculture, using science as one of the key elements to support decision-making. So I think if we would have, this innovative vision of other institutions like SENACYT, not only in Panama, but also in many other Latin American countries, which would see the benefit of providing this practical experience to early career scientists who are interested in public policy, who are interested in providing and contributing with their science expertise to address, public policy challenges. So I think this is the innovative vision that we have that is strategic for sustainable development or for achieving the SDGs, not only in Panama, but cross borders in Latin America, the Caribbean. So thank you very much, Rosario. Thank you very much, SENACYT, for joining us in this huge challenge. And I'm really happy to see how much you're doing, in the science policy interface work. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. It's a perfect segue and topic to now pass on to our next panelist, Dr. Teresa Birthwright, who will be presenting to us from Jamaica on the specialty coffee producing livelihoods and the challenges and opportunities in the era of global environmental change. And Teresa, please go ahead.
Thank you, Kim. All right, I'm just gonna share my screen. Seeing a bear. Okay. Okay. Screen. Nobody's seeing my screen. Okay. Hi, everyone. As Kim said, my name is Teresa Birthwright. I'm from Jamaica, reside in Jamaica. I have a PhD in geography. Mainly my area of focus is within the agriculture sector, like Rosario. And when she was speaking about, her passion for local producers, like it's just reminiscent of my own passion for our local producers here in Jamaica. Because oftentimes their voices are underrepresented, they are the marginalized, even though they perform such an important duty and job, in terms of food security and food production. Right, so that's my area of really, having a genuine passion to uplift those voices that are often at the grassroots level. So I'm very, thankful for that. And, I am a STEP fellow, and I am very thankful for the opportunity to share my work, which is mainly on the coffee producing livelihoods here in Jamaica. Because, within this sector, it's often under-researched, and I am a strong supporter of research that is relevant and development-oriented, really providing the solutions to the problems that we face in the global south, right? Because I think the role of research really goes beyond simply adding new knowledge, right, to the scientific literature. It is also responsible for influencing, societal change and shaping policy. All right, so let's just get into the meat of the presentation. All right, so just a little background on Jamaica's specialty coffee industry. Right, so the majority of my work, as I said before, work and experience has focused on rural livelihoods, specifically examining the realities of smallholder coffee farming livelihoods in Jamaica within the era of global change. Right, so within Jamaica, we actually produce less than 0.1% of the global coffee that is traded. And we have two distinct coffee producing zones. We have the Blue Mountain zone that I'm sure many persons know of, and also the non-Blue Mountain zone is also called High Mountain coffee. Now, the industry is also one of the main contributors to the island's GDP. Coffee actually accounted for 83% of our traditional agricultural exports in 2016, right? And it actually earned around 23 million US dollars. But of course, this is like a far cry from what we actually used to produce and earn. So the industry has experienced around a 58% decline in export earnings since 2000. Okay. So it's important to really understand the operation of the specialty coffee industry and its challenges, especially within an era shaped by an unequal capitalist system and climate change, right? We find that the coffee sector and economy as a whole has succumbed to neoliberal policies, which resulted in declining state support to the coffee, to coffee landscapes and livelihoods. Now, this includes, decline in support services, limited social safety nets, weak research and technology platforms or mechanisms, inefficient extension services, and things like that. So really for the Caribbean, our small economies within this region, we often bear this debilitating remnants, as you call it, of past colonial rule and really the deep-seated scars of prescribed economic reforms and restructuring programs. Now, these experiences have been, further compounded by our small size, right? And really our susceptibility to natural disasters and economic shocks. Now, Caribbean economies, basically we've been held hostage by these features, further retarding our development and really crippling rural livelihoods and hindering economic growth. Now, even from a climate perspective, it is said that coffee growers are by far the most numerous group that is directly affected and the most vulnerable, right, to the impact of climate change. Now, we find that farmers are currently battling, seasonal patterns or changes in seasonal patterns, intense hurricanes, increasing temperatures, variable rainfall, drought conditions, changes in the crop calendar, the coffee leaf rust, the coffee berry borer, the decreased yield, decreasing production, and also seasonal hunger. So our local farmers are facing extreme challenges. Now, one would think that being a part of the specialty coffee market, farmers would be, somewhat sheltered from such a high, sheltered within a high value niche market, right? Compared to the commodity market, because we know that commodity coffee, it is known for, its extremely low price on the world market due to its absence of having distinct quality or flavor profiles. It is often grown in unspecialized areas or growing environments. You often have, unspecialized agronomic techniques. So, commodity coffees they can be produced in extremely large amounts, right? Where supply often surpasses demand on the world market. On the other hand, with specialty coffee, it actually originates from a distinct geographic area, right? Grown within specific microclimates, and it is highly valued above commodity grade coffee, right? Due to its high cup quality and the possession of distinctive flavor attributes and flavor profiles, right? So even though Jamaica produces specialty coffee, we find that our farmers, we also operate in a risky environment of high susceptibility to natural disasters. We have to deal with, expensive farm inputs. There's high capital investment. There's high maintenance costs, right? And there's an absence of risk alleviating schemes. I'm speaking specifically within the Jamaican context, right? Plus, we're also receiving low farm gate prices. So when you think of all of these, challenges that our farmers are experiencing, despite the climatic and the socioeconomic challenges, the reduced support services, etc., our farmers are still expected to build resilience, right? And maintain their production of this luxury crop, right? Because, you know, Blue Mountain coffee is one of the world's most expensive coffees, right? So when you think of how farmers are expected to maintain this luxury crop, but, you know, these high prices for Blue Mountain coffee, it's rarely reflected in the incomes of our local smallholder farmers within the coffee value chain. Now, we find that there is a narrative, right, of building resilience. I can use that in quotations right there, building resilience, especially as it relates to climate change, right? Now, farmers are encouraged to become resilient and take responsibility for their own survival. But, you know, for me, I think it is impossible to build resilience while still maintaining, you know, the status quo or the disabling environment in which our farmers currently operate, right? I believe that we first have to address and transform, right, the fundamental, broader social, political, and economic construct and power relations which govern vulnerable spaces and livelihoods. We first have to do that before we can even, you know, begin to talk about being resilient. So this transformation really requires engaging the science policy interface to disrupt this status quo and bring about wide and holistic and sustained change, right? Because in order to ensure sustained resilience at the local level, the policy framework that shapes the broader institutional structures at the national level must be strengthened. Now, this also applies to another aspect of my work, which I've gotten into more recently, and that is with supporting women's increased participation within the coffee value chain, right? So we know that gender equality is a global priority, and we find that, you know, rural women experience a greater impact from climate change. And within the coffee space, you know, women, they contribute to the crop's quality. You know, they are pickers of cherry coffee. They contribute to the overall operation of the farm and the overall function of the coffee chain, right? But this has largely gone unnoticed. Their contribution, right, has largely gone unnoticed. And according to the UNDP 2019 Human Development Report, coffee growing countries actually possess gender gaps which are among the greatest in the world, right? And in Jamaica, our coffee industry, it is a male-dominated industry, right? And there are also, you know, several weaknesses within the industry. There's been a lack of research or empirical data on even the women who operate within that landscape, right? So knowledge of the role of women and their unique challenges in participating in the coffee chain has been limited. And that is why, you know, the organization that I'm a part of, the Jamaica Women in Coffee, it is about recognizing the contribution of women to the industry, right? Using evidence-based research to really disrupt this space and catalyze, as you would call it, you know, positive change, right, within the industry. And for our organization, the Jamaica Women in Coffee, you know, providing a foundation of evidence-based research really allows us to pursue appropriate and targeted and practical solutions to address issues, these pressing issues or concerns facing our women. As you can see on your screen, where, you know, women, they contribute to the majority of the farm labor, yet they're virtually invisible within the coffee chain. You find a lot of the value added, for the value added work, it's mostly occupied by men. Now, opportunities for the rural, as you call it, because gender equity, you know, or equality, it's not just about women, but it's that balance between men and women. Oftentimes we forget about the men, right? But you know, it is having that fairness between both genders, right? Men and women. And we find that there must be equitable access to opportunities, you know, such as training and, you know, use of technical knowledge, opportunities to access financing and, you know, technology, opportunities to own land ownership, right? And accessing productive resources. Also, it's about strengthening women's productive capacity and, you know, decision-making power. And this really includes integrating gender perspectives in the design of public policies, right? And rural development intervention strategies, you know, such as this can include, for example, the collection of disaggregated data to capture gender disparities and, you know, the different livelihood experiences within the rural environment, and also developing assessments to better inform policy and program design towards addressing the concerns of, you know, climate change impacts or other social or economic concerns. So really, our decision makers and policy makers, we have an opportunity, right, to evaluate the maintenance of this status quo, or, you know, this disabling environment, to really tackle the social, economic, and climatic challenges. And that really requires a sharper focus of our officials, of our decision makers and policy makers, to really implement action-oriented strategies and these evidence-informed policy responses. And of course, as you can see on the slide, you know, the benefits of gender equity, it drives innovation, it strengthens resilience of local communities. You know, you have emerging leaders coming up at the local scale, you know, or women becoming leaders, community leaders, you know, and sharing their knowledge with other community members. It improves financial stability for households, right? Increases their productivity, and really strengthens environment and climate action. So these are benefits that our policymakers and, you know, decision makers and the country as a whole will reap, you know, once we have this idea of targeting and uplifting those that are, you know, underrepresented and often marginalized. Thank you so much for your time. That's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Very, very fascinating. I could listen to you talk about specialty coffee all day. I think that it is a common theme, and I think Larisse will also continue in this theme about our work in uplifting marginalized voices through our work. And I really want to point out a comment that you made that I think is also important to our listeners about the uniqueness of the role of researchers in the Global South. It is not just about generating new knowledge, you said. It is also about the responsibility that we have towards the development, the sustainable and inclusive development of our countries. And that is, it is the passion that drives us as researchers. It is also a heavy burden that we carry as researchers as well, as we do our work, but we also had to advocate continuously for the investment in research, innovation, and development in each of our countries. So I know we all carry that banner in addition to the work that we're trying to do in the lab or in the field. So thank you very much for your presentation. And Teresa, Marcella has a quick comment before we pass it on to Larisse.
Yes, I think I cannot help, congratulating our fellows because they are really amazing. And I just want to share with the audience, our own experience of working with these early career scientists that really want to make a difference for society in their countries with their communities. And I think, Teresa, you're also a wonderful example of that. I have had the privilege of working directly with Teresa. She's been, our right and left hand in many of the tasks at the II Directorate. And one comment that I want to share with the audience, because I think this is going to be part of the discussion, is we were discussing leadership and, how would you consider leaders to take on those challenges, right, in science and research and in policy. And she was humble, too humble to say, I don't consider myself a leader. And actually, it's the other way around. And Teresa is a perfect example of a leader. She's been leading her research with Jamaican coffee women in Jamaica. I think to be able to put that together and take that ownership in, planning the research, getting people involved, acting between the farmers, the scientific community, the university, and also with other stakeholders. It takes a lot of skills. It takes knowledge, takes discipline, it takes, willingness to be able to provide that time and space for everybody to come up to solutions that would be a win-win for everybody. And so I would congratulate you for your leadership. And I think it's been a wonderful experience even for us working at the multinational space. And I think, other women like ourselves will be taking on new leadership positions, whether it's, again, in science or in policy, but hopefully more in science and policy, because we need more of women leaders and leaders from all countries, especially in small countries like, Jamaica and Panama and Central America and the Caribbean. So I just wanted to congratulate all of you for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcella.
Well done. Okay, I am very happy to present our final panelist for today, Dr. Larisse Faroni Perez, who will talk to us, and your group member. Larisse joins us from Brazil. She's a PhD in ecology, and she will speak to us today about using an ocean literacy approach with waste picker associations to improve ocean sustainability, restoration, biodiversity, and ecosystem services. Thank you, Larisse, for joining us. The floor is yours.
I'm sharing my screen. Yeah. So in the first instance, I would like to say I am sharing with Teresa not only the marginalized society, but I am also sharing the topic of building resilience. And that is what I am looking for. And also with Rosario, the action to put stakeholders on same table to talk. So I'm very proud to be II STEP fellow. Meanwhile, Marcella was telling to this audience what is the program, the institution. I was realizing how great it is. So be part of this training, be part of the second generation and the first one from here in Brazil. So thanks, Kim, Marcella, and everyone. It's such a pleasure to be in this session. I am Larisse, I'm talking from Brazil. I am an II STEP and also BPBES fellow. And I would like to say Carlos Jolie, professor Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am here on this training program because of BPBES as well. So I am also a GOX founder. As Kim was saying, I am a biologist. I did my PhD in ecology, and my thesis was on the impact of climate change on marine reef building organisms. But nowadays, and because there is no planet B, we are in a global crisis, and that needs a global change. So we need to think globally and act locally. So I'm working on the interface of science, society, policy. And today I will speak a bit on policy to society using an ocean literacy approach with waste picker association to improve ocean sustainability, restoration, biodiversity, and ecosystem services. So here in Brazil, as in other countries around the world, we have a national solid waste policy that regulates household, manufacturing, commercial, industrial waste. It characterizes the source as responsible for the proper waste management and disposal. So this law also encourages state and local entities to develop plans for the correct waste disposal and also fostering recycle and reverse logistics. But unfortunately, the law isn't working properly, and solid waste is an increasing concern everywhere. It is poorly managed, amplifying the threat of global crisis, climate crisis, public health crisis, social, economic, biodiversity, and so on. So over the last 70 years, the economic growth model, besides the increasing dependency on single-use packing and also the disposable eating, has led to a torrent plastic pollution and production, of course. So, for example, global cumulative production of plastics is forecast to grow from 9 billion tons to 34 billion tons by 2050. And the plastic recycling is less than 10%. And here in Brazil, we actually recycle less than 3%. So we don't need to be a genius or a PhD to see and understand that plastic producers, together with weak policy, created a huge problem. And we need to work on that. And that's what I'm trying to do. So, for example, it is estimated a garbage truck worth of plastic enters into the ocean every single minute. And that cannot be considered a social norm. We need to change it right now. All the unmanaged waste becomes plastic pollution everywhere. As plastics don't biodegrade, they enter the ocean, they break down into smaller and smaller pieces, which have been found in the digestive system of many aquatic organisms that we eat. Here in Brazil, plastic was found in 80% of commercial fishes that we eat. Plastic is found also in water that we drink. So without urgent action, plastic pollution threats nature, human health, and economy. Plastic pollution in our ocean reduces valuable marine ecosystems up to 2,500 billion each year. And that is not including other social and economic laws, like cultural laws, psychological well-being, tourism, and shipping. About shipping, I need to emphasize that plastic and microplastic is a real problem for the international market, as sheets, cooling filters, and radiators are being and also will be blocked by plastics. So that's a huge problem. So to reverse the growing decline in ocean health and also in the environmental crisis, and to support the United Nations decade for ocean science for sustainable development, and also the UN decade on ecosystem restoration, I implemented the project Cultura Oceânica e Catação. That means ocean literacy and pickup, or ocean literacy and solid waste segregation to recycle. That project involves assertive communication and also urgent sense. It involves and connects different stakeholders. We put them on the same table. We involve, and this is the front of the project, the Waste Picker Association, the workers, several institutions, society, decision makers, and government. So we planned the steps of this project following the theory of change. Our target is to increase stakeholder engagement into recycling and also in sustainable consumption. That means behavior change to minimize plastic pollution in our ocean, and also it's better for our health. So a clean ocean is a challenging and an output of the UN Ocean Decade. Ocean literacy is present in all the steps planned for this project. We are promoting people reconnection to nature, demonstrating nature's contributions for us, demonstrating the ocean's value for our existence, our health, income, future, for our life. For example, a question I used to ask people is, what is the value of the oxygen for you? When people realize that most part of the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean, people slow down to rethink on the ocean importance for the humanity. They become more interested in understanding all the importance of the ocean for us, and also how we are influencing negatively the ocean health, and what are the solutions, what can we do? And that is the point, that is the click to people to start to change their behavior. Up to now, we are training speakers from 3 associations, actually 4. We just did a new partnership. We have now 4 different associations in 4 different cities, and those cities are located in the adjacencies of the biggest urban mangrove forest in Brazil. So speakers generate their income daily. They collect and separate materials for recycling. They work is essential services for sustainability, for the ocean health, for the nature, for the climate, for us. So we are promoting capacity building to empower waste pickers to go aboard their workplace, to interact and meet citizens, kids, politicians, to talk about them, about policy needs. What are the proper waste disposal and recycling? So all this in order to support jobs, to protect nature, and to avoid ocean pollution. For example, an integrative act took place in last July during the World Ocean Day celebration. We promoted an event in the beach, integrating speakers with general society, kids, NGOs, public partners, local government. We offered several activities like observing marine animals, other activities to understand marine pollution, specifically plastic pollution. Speakers had opportunity to talk to society about segregating material, about recycling. We had art and entertainment activities to sensibilize people, to transform their behavior positively, to be more nature friendly. So all these actions is also an effort to promote people's reconnection to nature. Our next steps are keep going with the ocean literacy training and mentoring associations in their needs, especially in the interface with the local government and with policies. So we will also develop in a co-creation design a campaign to raise awareness and increase citizen engagement on the recycling. And for that, yesterday, we just got a nice opportunity. We are signing a new partnership for the Green Action Week, which is an initiative from the Swedish Society Nature for Protection, which is joined by Brazilian Institute of Consumer Protection. So finally, next month, we will have a meeting at the Legislative Assembly of the Espírito Santo State to keep the dialogue with politicians, with policymakers, and evoke urgent decisions to improve recycling, design new policies to ban single-use packing, disposable items, while we encouraging citizens to change their behavior, helping nature, planet, and humanity. So, three key messages that I would like to let you know is ocean currents and plastic pollution are transboundary. So as the policies for cleanup and marine ecosystem restoration actions needs to be, plastic products are create greenhouse gas emissions across the entire life cycle, intensifying the global climate crisis in a very negative feedback loop. Behavior change intervention can increase plastic recycling and reduce ocean pollution. So I would like to thank all the partners, Brazilian Platform of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services for the opportunity, ArcelorMittal for the financial support on this project, the Waste Speakers Association, and all the GOX team, and of course, the IEI staff. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Larisse. Wonderful. I think that your comment at the end about the transboundary issue, I'm very happy that you are able to take your work and apply it in one of the science diplomacy group projects that we're working on, and Teresa's on your group as well, because I love the focus of this group is on microplastics pollution, but also on behaviorally aligned action. And I would just like to highlight how excellent you are in communicating your topic. And that is a skill that you absolutely need to be able to engage this wide variety of stakeholders that you bring to the table to these events on the beach, which helps that they're at the beach. But then you also take it to the legislative branch as well, and you're pushing for policy. So you're able to use analogies that are very impactful. And that's part of your communication skills that I think make you successful now, will continue to make you successful in your career. And I'll just add that an additional member of this group is actually a PhD in cognitive behavior. So he's also bringing another interesting discipline to the work that will hopefully expand beyond what you're doing in Brazil and to the other countries that we're working with in STEP. And I think that goes back to even Rosario's presentation. She showed an incredible team at the beginning. If you noticed the interdisciplinary nature of the work that she's doing, we cannot do this alone. We need to pull in different disciplines. We need to engage marginalized voices, involve people at the table. And I'm just so impressed to see these skills growing in the fellows that we work with, and always welcoming more at the table and pushing for those policy actions and seeing the bigger picture as you see it, Larisse, the effects of the ocean and the air that we breathe, and that this is a transboundary issue. So thank you so much for that excellent presentation. I know we are close to our ending time, and I do want to pass it over to Marcella for a final comment as well. So please go ahead, Marcella.
Thank you so much. I guess this is our panel discussion, so to speak. But I would also like to take the opportunity to congratulate Larisse. I think the topic that you're addressing, it's vital importance. I mean, oceans and plastic, microplastic is a huge problem. The III has been discussing this with several countries. So from Canada to Brazil, all governments are really concerned about the impact. And plastic is all over our productive sectors. So we cannot really close the eyes and pretend, you know, that's not a huge problem that we really have to address with the science and with the policy. And I think the way you presented it, it's so well thoughtful. You're thinking from the science to society to policy, all key actors in this dialogue and this collaboration, and we cannot, you know, ignore the importance of all the communities and the community engagement as well. And I really would like to also point out how clever it is your view, and you're working towards many important aspects of the whole issue, thinking of an integrated view from the science to the community engagement, to the capacity building, to the outreach to society, and to the importance, as Kim was pointing out, the science communication. How do you communicate your science and how important this topic is for the communities and for policymakers and for legislative branch? They are making the laws, you know, they can have a key role in how plastic is going to be seen or and the impacts on the environment and on society. So this key view of how you combine those stakeholders from the impact to the communication side is really what we need to address the SDGs in a way that is beyond convention and traditional. You know, what are innovative research, capacity building programs that we can design, how we can be creative enough to engage with different communities, thinking about how the science can indeed benefit society. So thank you so much, Larisse, for your wonderful work. And my last comment is also to thank and congratulate the Brazilian Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and my dear friend here, Carlos Jolie, who I have had the privilege of working with for several years. I think the view of the Brazilian platform in terms of training researchers working in biodiversity ecosystem services to and place them in key policy bodies like legislative and executive branches, you know, because there's so much importance of biodiversity and the key role of ecosystem services that we have to take into account in many tiers of government, also at the federal, state and local levels. So I think the view that Carlos has had in the Brazilian platform is really to be congratulated, and we are very grateful, and you know, having the opportunity of working with you as well in the STEP program. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcella. I will echo those words about Dr. Jolie's influence also in putting together the STEP program for the III. Without champions like him, we would not have been able to do this. So at this point, I would like to invite anyone from the audience, if they have any comments or questions, please feel free to raise your hand and or include in the chat. And Pato, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it's so great to see you. If you have a question, please go ahead. No? Wendy, please. Thank you, Wendy. Go ahead, unmute yourself. We would be happy to hear you.
¿Cómo están? Buenas tardes.
Hola.
Soy de Bolivia y la verdad es mi consulta viene desde el punto de vista que recién estoy conociendo lo que es IAI y lo que es la institución académica de la cual están haciendo las ponencias. Y me parece muy interesante escuchar que desde la academia ya se pueda tener este componente un poco más desde la diplomacia, llegando incluso a alcanzar, como el ejemplo de los océanos, con la participación del gobierno. Pero mi consulta es respecto un poco hacia cómo se percibe la parte de los cambios institucionales, viniendo desde la academia, por ejemplo. Si bien se va a hacer publicaciones y se puede llegar a hacer algún tipo de acción, investigación, acción participativa, ¿cuál es el cambio institucional dentro de la academia que se puede realizar para generar agendas un poco más colaborativas desde nuestros propios países a través de la interacción que se realiza obviamente a nivel más global, como dicen, hacerlo local sin perder la parte global? Y desde la parte también de diálogo gubernamental, manejan mucho el tema de la interdisciplinariedad, ¿verdad? Transdisciplinariedad, perdón. Entonces, ¿cuál es la posición respecto a la definición de la producción del conocimiento? Porque hay el debate de qué es conocimiento y cómo se reconoce dentro de la academia ese tipo de discursos. Entonces, esas serían mis dos consultas. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Wendy. Excelente pregunta. No sé si Rosario o Larisse or Teresa, you have a comment you'd like to make about Wendy's question?
I can make a comment. That's okay. Yeah, so basically the role of academia, right, in the whole science policy interface, for me, I think that the whole cross-border scientific collaboration that universities engage in is particularly important for fostering, you know, or strengthening the relationship between countries, or diplomatic relationship, and not just from a diplomatic angle, but also from an institutional angle as well, and also from a knowledge base, increasing knowledge to tackle a particular problem, a particular challenge that both countries or even several countries are facing, right? So that cross-border collaboration, universities are particularly integral in that regard. And also, the lobbying of certain or various scientific issues, right, that needs to be incorporated into public policy, and as well as raising awareness on the importance of evidence-informed policy. That's also a role of academia. That's a crucial role of academia as well. Thinking back to how here in Jamaica, looking at the science policy interface, platform here in Jamaica, it's very ad hoc, as you say. It's nothing formal, right? We have our public policies. They will do consultations, and they will engage academia in those consultations to inform the public policy. But there's no formal mechanism in place to say, okay, this is the process that you go through, right? So it's very as the situation comes up, right? But even then, academia plays a role in that regard as well. And also, representing the interests of universities and the knowledge that they generate that is critically important in the whole science policy conversation. Yes.
Thank you, and Teresa. Wendy, I think Rosario's presentation for me really showed how the amount of work that Rosario is doing to institutionalize her work. You saw all of the logos of the institutions that she shared, and she is doing the hard work of signing convenios or agreements with each of those institutions. And for those of us in Latin America, we know the time and effort that it takes to sign anything, especially a convenio, that those are the tools to institutionalize. But as we often say at the IEI, it's just a piece of paper unless you put it into action, right? So then it takes people like Rosario, like Larisse, like Marcella, like Teresa, to then take this document and say, look, we signed this 2 years ago, a year ago, 10 years ago, and we want to put it into action. So you have that institutional backup, which is that formality that's very important in the Global South to support these innovative actions that you want to push forward through in the legislative branch, on the ground, in policies. So I really appreciated that effort that Rosario, I think it's utterly impressive to institutionalize it. And then I shared in the chat, Wendy, you asked about the transdisciplinary approach. We have resources at the IEI and often are hosting events to bring, to build capacity in integrating the transdisciplinary approach into your work as a researcher, as a policymaker. It's open to a variety of stakeholders. So please sign up. You can sign up for our newsletter and get events as they come. And all of our events are in Spanish and English, and hopefully soon also Portuguese at the same time. we need to expand that interpretation services. So we have a question here in the chat about how to strengthen partnerships. Larisse, you wanted to make a comment. Please.
Yeah, I just want to add some comments on these. It's not easy, but we can do partnerships. We need to be very innovative in how build those projects. So citizen science can also help, Wendy, because citizen science can be a research. So we will publish that as well. And Rosario said 2 keywords, that is commitment and also be patient for what you do, love what you do. So that's very, very important. Yeah. So of course we need to have our feet on floor, but I really do believe we are on inflection point. We are on a tipping point. The world is changing. The market is changing. The companies, the private sector are changing. So they are looking for ESG. So finally, and that is no greenwashing. I see that some huge companies are changing. So that's a real good moment for us to go aboard the university as the pickers, to go aboard the associations, to talk and put everyone on the table and work together.
Thank you. Such a great comment, Larisse. Thank you. So Beatriz in the chat asked, how do you strengthen partnerships? And are there key areas of focus? I imagine, where do you start, perhaps? If anyone wants to take a stab at answering that question.
I mean, for me, you start at having a common desire, and as Larisse said, a common commitment to solve a particular problem, right? And once you establish that and have that engagement, that common goal that both, you know, whether organizations or just stakeholders across the board have identified, then establishing those partnerships to really tackle those challenges, right? So for example, with the Jamaica Women in Coffee, we are the national organization of the International Women's Coffee Alliance, right? And, you know, our job, apart from engaging with our main stakeholders, which are, you know, the women on the ground, it's about also establishing partnerships with government stakeholders, right? We have our regulatory stakeholder, Jamaica Agricultural Commodities Regulatory Authority, and they're the ones in charge of the coffee industry. They regulate the coffee industry. Like the green bean coffee cannot be exported unless it goes through them, right? So they are a critical partner to have on board to see the evidence or the research that, you know, we have showing the importance of the voices of women and how, you know, it's important to ensure that they are trained. It's important to the quality of the industry overall, right? Because they must see that it will contribute to the quality of the industry because that's their focus, right? So it must be like a win-win situation where partners on board to say, okay, if I'm going to tackle this issue, what is in it for me? Right? That's oftentimes something that they'll say, what's the benefit for me? Even with private stakeholders, right? Where's the benefit? And I think, you know, when you align yourself with these stakeholders and you are open to understanding their views, their perceptions, and they're also open to understanding where you're coming from as an organization or as a, you know, stakeholder on the ground, that commonality there, I think, is the way forward, right? So it shouldn't be a toxic thing. I think where everyone should be able to benefit and see the benefit of that partnership and that collaboration going forward.
Spot on. Thank you so much, and Teresa, I completely agree. Actually, Rosario, I wanted to ask you to answer this question, and if you could, because I thought it was interesting that you tied these partnerships back to the SDGs, right? And so it's building partnerships, but then connecting them to this international goal to meet these sustainable development goals. Where did that come from, and how are you selling that to each of these partners? Did that come from you? Did that come from each of the institutions? So perhaps I'd like to ask you to answer this question, but then also include how you made that link to the Sustainable Development Goals.
Muchas gracias. Estaba ansiosa por responder a estas preguntas. Estos convenios surgen en base a una necesidad. Nosotros hemos hecho negociaciones. Yo rescato el hecho de que esas negociaciones cuento con el apoyo del director del INEC, el magíster Samuel Moreno, que está aquí presente. Él junto a mí hemos liderizado estas reuniones. Vamos juntos a todas las reuniones interinstitucionales con todas las instituciones vinculadas al sector agropecuario. Por ejemplo, ¿cómo yo las vinculé con las preguntas del censo agropecuario? Estas preguntas del censo agropecuario fueron moldeadas a la situación actual que emergen tanto a Panamá como al mundo entero. Las innovaciones son cambiantes y surgen en base a necesidades. Hemos diseñado, hemos realizado pequeñas modificaciones a todos los capítulos de las encuestas. Y cada capítulo está vinculado a sectores específicos del sector agropecuario, vinculados a estas instituciones agropecuarias de las cuales en su momento realizamos talleres institucionales. Todas estas instituciones que nos estamos realizando convenios participaron en la adecuación de las preguntas para el censo experimental, censo nacional, que son las mismas. Estas preguntas, como ustedes han visto, están vinculadas a las ODS, partiendo de cómo las necesidades del productor, cuántos productores están produciendo, por qué produces tal cosa, cuánto generas en producción. Nos importa mucho poder explicarle, enseñarle al productor cómo planificar. Este censo agropecuario nos permitirá conocer más allá de una data cuantificable, poder que el país entero se volque a la necesidad de que el sector agropecuario no se estanque. Los lineamientos de los objetivos ODS, en su momento, la sección agropecuaria a través de la FAO habían vinculado solamente un objetivo. Cuando tú aquí me llamaste, Rosario, me gustaría que participaras, y yo, listo. Yo hasta el momento no tenía casi nada de esto, pero yo me estudié los 17 objetivos. Y yo, espérate, aquí hay muchos objetivos que están vinculados a la planificación del censo agropecuario. Y es lo que yo estoy haciendo con los convenios. Entonces, ¿yo qué hacía en cada reunión? Yo les vendía a ellos la necesidad de por qué ellos necesitaban aportar a los ODS. Ellos se entusiasmaban en base a la necesidad, en base a querer conocerse, de no quedarse atrás porque otra institución también estaba aportando, y saber de que era el primer portal agropecuario en Panamá, y aquí la mayoría todos somos productores, aunque tengan una gallinita, 3 palos de mango, todo va a ser una necesidad. Entonces, yo puedo adelantarme de que cada vez que hacemos estas reuniones, ya llevamos 3, hemos notado mucha complacencia, mucho esmero, mucho entusiasmo de las diferentes direcciones para consolidar esta información estadística. No sé si pude responder entonces a las preguntas. Todavía no hemos terminado estos convenios. Los convenios tienen una duración de 5 años, pero estamos tratando con asesoría legal de que sean por 10 años. Nosotros actualmente con el director Moreno, sabemos que él desea que esta plataforma sea una realidad antes que él se vaya. Nosotros queremos armar todos estos convenios con todas las instituciones actuales antes que pase un gobierno, porque ustedes saben, pasa un gobierno y las cosas se estancan. Entonces lo que queremos es agilizar este proceso. Sé que no es fácil, pero contamos con el apoyo. Para eso tenemos una planificación. Yo la estructuré una planificación de diferentes actores, un planificador tecnológico, un planificador geográfico, un planificador económico, tenemos un planificador interinstitucional por el INEC, o sea, las personas están comprometidas y ese compromiso lo visualizamos y lo demostramos a cada reunión que nosotros vamos con las instituciones. Y con esas instituciones también creamos un vínculo de planificación, no los dejamos solos. Por ejemplo, el día de mañana tenemos una reunión de planificación con el IPACOP. Ya nosotros tuvimos una primera reunión con ellos. Ellos están entusiasmados en compartirnos toda la información estadística del sector agropecuario. Ahora esta reunión va a ser de enseñarle al personal técnico del IPACOP, de quienes están haciendo encuestas para saber cuántas cooperativas hay, qué otras variables o indicadores nosotros necesitamos para poder proyectarla en la plataforma agropecuaria. Y eso es lo que estamos haciendo con cada institución. Por ejemplo, con el ARAP, que es la Autoridad de Recursos Acuáticos de Panamá, es la primera vez, como les mencioné, que el censo agropecuario está implementando el capítulo de pesca. De allí sacamos de que ellos nos van a acompañar en el acompañamiento técnico para ejecutar estas encuestas para el sector pesquero. Ellos nos van a mostrar la data. Ellos tienen la necesidad de que no cuentan con estadísticos que puedan a ellos homologar la información. Entonces es un dar y dar. ¿Qué proporciona el INEC y qué puede proporcionar entonces la otra institución? A fin de que todos nosotros tengamos una alianza de beneficio conjunto. De esa manera estamos llevando los convenios.
Fantastic, Rosario. Excellent. I truly appreciate all that effort. And now with the approaching of the final moments, I would like to thank the audience for staying with us throughout the entirety of our time. It has been such an enriching dialogue. I thank you for your questions and for your comments. Thank you, Marcella and Teresa. I almost said it like Larisse said it. And Teresa, Larisse, Rosario. Thank you so much, really, truly, for your work, for your time today and putting together these messages. I am left truly with the importance of, especially when we talk about, and Marcella alluded to this in her presentation, the ODS, the SDG about partnerships and alliances and strengthening alliances, right? And this goes back to how we're finishing. How do you strengthen these partnerships? And I think Rosario and Larisse and Teresa answered it perfectly. When we talk about the importance of having innovative and novel approaches to the problems that we're facing. And you can do that by having passion for what you do, having an interdisciplinary team behind you, working with you and bringing different perspectives to the table, tying it into a national need, right? That these are urgent needs that we're facing as a country, but then also now bringing it to an international, bigger picture scope. How can we all work together towards achieving these sustainable development goals? Which, you know, time is ticking, right? So it's really wonderful to see how hard you are each working on the ground. And I'm very happy that the II and the UN is also able to provide these international platforms so that we can hear your stories and empower your voices and share the lessons that we're learning and try and amplify the effect that we have. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and have a great, wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Marcella.
Thank you,
Take
ladies.
care.
Thank you to the audience as well.
Going to stop.